From Content 360, this is the state of client acquisition. Hey everyone, this is Michael Bohannes, and this is the State of Client Acquisition podcast. And it's our first episode. So if you're listening to this in January or February 2021, you're at the beginning of something truly special for me, and I'm very grateful you have decided to tune in. The format of this podcast is clearly focused on your questions, on your challenges with organic, high-value client acquisition. So we'll be taking your questions about anything that has to do with positioning, offer creation, inbound marketing, outbound prospecting, sales calls, and everything else in between. And you can submit any of those questions if you don't join the live calls, which are always on Wednesday at 7 p.m. CET, Central European Time. If you cannot join, then just go to stateofclientacquisition.com, where you can submit a written question or simply record an audio question right there from your browser. Cool. So who is this for? This is for coaches, consultants, small B2B companies, but even larger B2B companies who want to grow their in-house skills in this fascinating area of organic client acquisition. And honestly, this is practically for anyone who has clients with a lifetime value of at least $2,000 and wants to get more clients, primarily focused on organic, i.e. non-paid, but in the future we'll also probably be adding paid acquisition as well. So with that scope, much of what we'll be talking about will be LinkedIn, because that's no doubt where the bulk of B2B client acquisition potential lies at this point in history. And my goal with this podcast is really, really simple. I want to help as many people as possible with their client acquisition. And as we're launching this, we're still in the midst of the COVID pandemic and many people are struggling. Most small B2B businesses have been in the past relying on referrals while the going was good. They were maybe doing a bit of networking and the occasional inbound lead also made their way in. But in the last 11 months, what has not been decimated by the lockdowns is now stifled by slashed budgets in all kind of areas, and all of that in a recession that's the worst since the Great Depression. So needless to say, there's a lot of people who need help with growing their business online and who now need to focus 100% of their energies on developing a value proposition that they can actively go to market with instead of just relying on networks and being honeypots that are going to be found. Unfortunately, in recessions and depressions, honeypots are not usually the best method. Being a honeypot is not usually the best method to get found because it's a buyer's market. It's not a seller's market. So that's what we'll be covering. And for an hour each week or more, let's see how many questions we get. For an hour each week, I'm all yours and we can discuss any problem that you may have. Just a quick intro about myself. I run a company called Content 360. I started it in 2016 as a content marketing agency, but then in 2019, I pivoted the business and went all in on courses and group coaching because the agency was growing and I was considering scaling it by adding employees. And then I realized I kind of don't want that. I'd rather scale in a different way where I don't have to hire and manage people. And so what we do now is that we train solopreneurs and small B2B CEOs to develop inbound and outbound client acquisition skills in-house. So that's as a quick intro to myself. And that's enough about me. Let's now get into what matters most to you, and that's getting clients. So today's first episode is real fun. I have a friendly debate with a LinkedIn expert from Australia, Michelle Raymond, who I had a fun exchange with on a comment thread about the merits of LinkedIn company pages. So we discussed that for about 30 minutes. Then I provide something of a 30,000 foot view on the topic of organic client acquisition on LinkedIn. And then we get into questions. So I hope there'll be some value for you there. And now let's get right into this episode. So I think this is a good point to jump into the discussion, and just to set a little bit of context here. The reason why we are on this podcast is because I posted a video about LinkedIn company pages being completely useless. And Michelle doing what she does. She helps companies to run their LinkedIn company pages and do them as well as possible. Thankfully, I love a controversial discussion, jumped on and jumped into the
I took the bait.
Exactly, and said that this shall not stand, sir, and had her own very strong position on this. And so what I would like to do is, and just a little bit of further background is, I was planning the launch of a podcast in Q1, but then I thought, wouldn't it be awesome to just kick off the series already now, early on in Q1. I plan to do it towards the end, but why not kick it off right away when we have a fantastic guest who's a very outspoken person, and we can kick it off with a little bit of a back and forth, some controversial discussion, and to have opposing viewpoints on a particular matter. So with that said, Michelle, the floor is yours. Tell us why LinkedIn company pages are the right thing to invest time in.
Okay, so the first thing, thank you so much for letting me be your first guest on your podcast. Congratulations. I wish you all the best for your journey on starting these things. So thank you for having me. And you're right, I did take the bait, because I do think that there's value in LinkedIn company pages. And before we go any further, it doesn't mean that I don't think that there's a value in personal pages. Okay, I think it's really important to build your personal brand, but I also think it's equally important to not exclude your company brands. Now, this obviously, it's not a one size fits all, but I think there's definite advantages for people with company pages. So I'm going to take the next few minutes to try and convince you, come over to my dark side, and see why I think that it's a really cool idea to run both at the same time. So admittedly, like if you're a consultant, a one-man band, maybe this isn't right for you, but I'd like you to kind of stop and consider for a moment, where do you want your business to be in 5 years' time? Because in 5 years' time, if you want to change from a one-man band to a company, it's, you've wasted 5 years building your brand. Okay, so the things that we do now, I'm planning for in the future. So some of the reasons that I would actually ask people to consider LinkedIn company pages, the number one reason I think it's awesome is because it's free. Like if you're a small business that doesn't have a huge budget for all things marketing, then why not start with a product that's absolutely free? We know that there's about 50 million LinkedIn company pages that have been created. And I believe that number is just going to get higher and higher really quickly. So for my clients, I love working with small and medium businesses, even consultants. And the reason that I love that is because you can really have such a big impact for such a low dollar value for these companies. So number one reason that I would say to you is because it's free. Right. So let's start there. So if you're going to move on, why? Sure, personal profile's free. So is the company page. So far we're even, right? But you're no worse off. So the next step that I would say is that it's really important as a company brand to start to educate your target market. Now, I don't know if you know, but people actually will believe more about your company and your brand, 60% more believe social media over advertising. So by building your social media brands, be it on, I'm a big advocate for LinkedIn, obviously, because I work in the business to business space predominantly. But if you are actually working in that space also, then, it's a really great way to build your credibility for your brand. And I believe that that's just as important for personal and for company. Another advantage that I would say is that you actually get to double your reach. Now, we know when the algorithm posts from your personal profile or from your company profile, the initial post reaches out to 5 to 10% of your initial contact. Now, depending on the success of that post, depends on how much further the algorithm keeps releasing it into your networks. Now, assuming that not every post is going to be the magic viral post that we all hope for, if you actually can do that in two different spaces, so you can get your company page going as well as your personal profile, then you've automatically doubled your impact, again, for less money. So I can see you thinking there, Michael. So I hope that that's you starting to think, yeah, maybe there's some value here in company pages.
Okay, well, so let me take your arguments and let me take them apart. So first of all, you say it's free. Well, so is TikTok, so is going on
Yes.
Instagram, so is Facebook, and so on. And I think
Sure.
especially for small companies, the bigger and more important order of the day is to focus. Where will you
Absolutely.
pick your energy? Where will you put your energy in? And having I would slightly call it a possible distraction to have to manage two channels rather than really laser focusing on one could simply be, there could be opportunity cost. And I think that is my main beef with people who advocate for generally, yeah, just be everywhere, be on social media, be on Twitter, be on Facebook, be on Instagram, and so on. I just feel, sure, if you're a huge company, and I admitted that in my initial video, if you're a huge company, yeah, just have everything, just have company
Agree.
pages, have Facebook, have Instagram, and all of that. And there's a good reason for doing that. You simply have the resources to do that. But the smaller you are, the more you will benefit from focus. Okay.
Agree,
So,
which is why I would say LinkedIn company pages for B2B businesses is something that I would focus on. And I agree with you. Spreading yourself too thin, especially if you're a small company, is not something that I'd advocate for either.
okay, but there we have the issue now. Will you focus on your founder's LinkedIn profile or your company page, right? So you essentially, if I get you correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're advocating for doing both, right? So that the founder has a strong personal profile, personal imprint, so to speak, as well as pushing content via the company page, right? Okay, good.
Yeah, that's right. And, it's really important to establish, quite often founders have, a thought leaders, and it's a great way to express what they actually see in their, specific industries. So I don't think that it's one in place of the other. I think it's a really good idea to have both. And to your point, when you're a small business and you don't have the resources to spread yourself too far, one of the great things about LinkedIn company pages is that you can actually assign page administrators. So within your company, you can actually share the workloads. So it doesn't all have to fall on one person. Now, for a very busy, CEO, founder, head of, quite often they're already stretched thin trying to run these small businesses. They're everything. They're the accountant, they're the marketing person, they're customer service, they're in charge of manufacturing. So being able to assign the admin rights to someone else within the company or external, which is not something that you can do on a personal profile page. It's actually against LinkedIn terms and conditions to assign your individual profile to someone else to actually access and post on your behalf. So I say you can share the workload.
Okay, good. So, okay, let me go through your other arguments as well. So you said number 2, people believe social media more than advertising. Now, granted, I would totally support that. The question is, won't people support or believe more founders if the founder kind of equates himself, herself with the company that they are leading? I think that's much more credible. And that is kind of my main beef with company pages, is that I just see generally far less engagement on company page content, but I'm sure you will have a very good comeback on that one. So I'm looking forward to that. But I see far less engagement with that. And I just also observe it in myself, just simply as a human. When there's a logo that's interacting with my content, I discount it. I just don't think this is somebody is hiding behind that. And I really think this is a big trend going forward, that business is really personalized. I really think, especially now in pandemic times when we are on lockdown and we kind of crave a human connection, that's kind of the things that we've been deprived of. If once we are on LinkedIn and we want to kind of connect with people, it's just much stronger when we do that with actually a human face rather than a logo. So I totally get it that, and by the way, just for clarity's sake, I'm not saying you should not have a company page. I am a solopreneur. I don't have full-time employees. I have a few contractors, but generally I'm by myself and I still have a company page and I cross-post everything that I post on my personal profile. I just also post it on the company page. You never know what might happen, right? And it costs me like 1 minute to do it each day. So it's not a problem at all. So I'm not saying don't have one. I would only argue, don't actively seek to increase your followership, to your company page, because LinkedIn ultimately, let's also think about the history. LinkedIn, when it was launched in 2004, was built as a tool to network, tool to connect people. And company pages only came in, I looked it up, only in 2018. So the platform is fundamentally built for human interaction, and company pages are just a thing that has been bolted on and duct taped on it. So they have their justification. I just would argue the smaller you are, the less energy you should be putting into your company page. And I'm just going to run through. I'm just going to, if I may quickly run through your other arguments, and then you can kind of respond to all of that. So the people believe social media over advertising. My counter argument would be yes, but even more so than they believe a company on social media, they would believe a founder. Okay. And somebody who is kind of like strongly heading up the company. And this is also where the other example comes in that I mentioned is, for example, when you look at the followership of Ray Dalio versus Bridgewater, Ray Dalio has, I think, 2 million followers. Bridgewater has 200,000. Similar with Virgin, Richard Branson has 18 million followers on LinkedIn. Virgin has some, I don't remember, again, a 6-digit figure. So far smaller.
But again, they've had a lot more time to build that, right? So, and Richard Branson isn't anyone without Virgin. We wouldn't care. We wouldn't care about Bill Gates if Microsoft didn't exist first up.
Of course.
So, they've only had 2 years to build. One point we do agree on is I think the quality of content on company pages leaves a lot to be desired. And I think that's where you and I absolutely agree, because no one does want just the corporate speech, the corporate spiel, the standard marketing that's pitch perfect every single time. And I strongly suggest to all of my clients, that's not the strategy that we ever implement. So what performs really well, and it goes to your point, we're craving that interconnection, people. We want to know what's going on. Around the world, there's various lockdowns that have happened, right? So we've all of a sudden craving that human interaction. Now, what performs really well on company pages is actually photos of behind the scenes, achievement of staff, promoting the people that actually work for these companies. And what you'll see is you can trade off their reputations within the industry and vice versa. Now, what I would say to you is, I agree, if you've got a founder that's got this really great personality, they're an extrovert, they're really good at posting content, they grew up in an era that was social media friendly, you're on a winner, right? But if you are, for instance, dealing with, and I see this quite often, especially I'm going to say females over the age of 50 who have 30 years experience and are amazing at what they do, but don't have the confidence to actually be the forward facing of normally consultancies or small businesses that they set up. They don't have that confidence or the skills. So we know that on any online community, you've only got, you might agree with me here, the stats are something like 0.5 to 1% of people actually post content regularly. So if I'm a company and I don't have anyone that falls within that 1%, what do you want me to do? Be invisible? Right? So, but what they will do is if you post company content, they're 14 times more likely to actually share that, engage with it, or like or comment, than what they are to actually create something themselves. So what I find is, by starting gently on the company page where the employees aren't responsible, they're not going to get judged, they feel a bit strange, then you actually see them start to come out of their shell and join in on the conversations. And I think that's really important. You can have a company page that performs without employee engagement, but if you can get the team on board and have both of them going, the results just come through so much faster. So, it all works great because people like you and I, we love social media. We love to be out there, but there's also such a big portion, like 99% of users will post infrequently, if ever at all, call them lurkers, call them whatever. We want to create a space where they feel safe, that they can start to engage with posts. The other thing that you've got is not every CEO and founder understands social media like you and I do and loves it and supports it. So quite often you'll find that individuals won't share their own personal opinions during company time or while they're employed for someone else, for fear that it's going to come back on them in some way in their company. So, and I think there's a bit of work to be done on both sides.
Okay. So if I hear you correctly, is you are saying that a LinkedIn company page can be something of a benign gateway drug, where people just become more used to using LinkedIn. They can loosen up, become a bit more comfortable, because something that they say on LinkedIn is not likely to fall back on them in some negative way, and they can just become more comfortable with doing that. Okay, that is one approach. I feel that this is it's not a wrong approach. I just think there's a much better one. If you say that you, because of this effect, that people are connecting with people so much easier and so much better, and it's much better, I believe, to educate people in how to do LinkedIn well as a person, so that you learn to strike that right balance between, on the one hand, you want to be professional, you want to be sharing professional content that will really reflect well on your company as someone who's competent, they know what they're doing, they can add value to their audience, and so on. So there's one thing. But on the other hand, you don't want to also be a complete corporate robot. And that's why learning this balance of sometimes sharing something personal it's an iterative process. Sometimes you do it right, sometimes you do it wrong. I remember I did way too personal posts to my taste, just because I saw so many people oversharing on LinkedIn. I thought, maybe this is what I need to do. And I realized that's just not my style. It's really not what I like to do. And there's plenty of counterexamples of people being really professional and still gaining a very big following. And they only post about their professional content. Chris Walker of Refine Labs being a very good example of that. His posts are highly technical, very complex, and extremely high quality. And he's built a following on that. He doesn't share ever anything personal. So there's many ways to do it right on the personal LinkedIn. And because you have you already are starting from a higher base, you have a couple of thousand followers already if you've been on LinkedIn for a while. So investing in that and learning how to do that well, I think it's going to pay off much more than in parallel building up a LinkedIn company page. It's it's a trade-off. That's what I'm saying.
Look, and I totally understand that training, I wholeheartedly support that. I think the more that people actually understand LinkedIn, the better off that they'll be. And the thing that I've actually found, and the reason that my business starts, is that I run a training program similar to what you run. We kind of come at it different ways. But what would happen is I would teach people, they would learn how to do it, and then they would go, we don't actually have the time, the resources, the inclination. Not everybody wants to write social media content, and so it's not necessarily, for all kinds of different reasons. It could be English as a second language. It could be something happened on a platform somewhere else that they had some feedback from a troll or something similar, and it comes across into LinkedIn. For me, LinkedIn, I've never had that experience, touch wood. It's been nothing but supportive, but there are people that get anxiety over the judgment that comes. And so what I found is, by actually creating a safe space, they're very happy to press like and, comment on company information. And what I found is my industry that I work in is the beauty industry, to do with manufacturing of skincare products. Now, a lot of people in that industry work behind the scenes in laboratories and places like that. They don't like to be seen. They like to hide away and do their work. And the thought of being out in front of people terrifies them. Now, if I'm a company owner, especially a small business owner, because I think that's what, you and I both focus on more so. I'm not talking about the Coca-Colas or the Googles or the big brand owners. They're in a different kettle of fish. But if we're talking small business, their alternatives, sure, you've got other platforms. They can invest in SEO. That's really expensive. It takes a lot of effort. Quite often, I find that people are really good at their particular business. They're, I guess, experts in their fields and have businesses within that. also don't want to take on anything else, you know. And so I think it's important that you share that knowledge, because there's some amazing, you know, for instance, in manufacturing, there's really some amazing companies with some amazing technology that nobody knows about, because their idea of marketing is, we got a website, you know. And so, okay, you got a website, no one knows about it, no one saw it, how are we going to let people know? And so that's where I think the LinkedIn company pages come in, to be able to educate your target market about the services that you offer. And so, good. You know, that's one of the spaces that I come from.
So my conclusion from this would be, and I totally give you that it's simply sometimes not possible to get a founder to become a social media influencer. So that's fine. I would always try to, well, I would not try to argue with them, because I don't believe in that. I think you should only try to work with people who kind of are already on your train. So I would not try to argue with them. What I would try to do is to, through my content, convince them to try to get out of their comfort zone. They don't have to be a influencer with millions and millions of followers, but simply by being human, posting regular content, posting videos of themselves, talking into the camera, is going to improve their off-the-cuff speaking ability. I see it in myself. I've reduced way more my and so on since I've been doing my videos for the last 2 or 3 months. It's really the development that you undergo just by regularly speaking into the camera is great. And I think it has simply improved my public speaking ability. So that aside, so I would first always try to convince them to do these things and to jump kind of out of their comfort zone box, to use many different metaphors in one, and to just become a bit more attuned to the fact that this is a little bit of like into the new age. And if you keep doing it, it feels like LinkedIn company pages are something of the last decade, quite literally, right? And it seems to me that, yes, as a fallback option, if I really cannot get you sold on the idea of you being the face of your company, then yes, doing a LinkedIn company page is indeed better than not do anything at all and to only rely on your website. So this is maybe a place where you and I can agree on. And I also agree with you, so also to kind of extend an olive branch here, I also agree with you that a company, as soon as you hit a certain size, you should definitely have a LinkedIn company page. It looks profoundly weird if you were to be a even 2-3 person company and you just have this gray, ugly LinkedIn icon that denotes that this is not a proper company. It just, it creates way more trust to have a company page. So these,
you're absolutely right.
Those 2 areas, I'm pretty sure we agree on. And so I'll let you have the last word on this.
Look, I think you're absolutely right. You know, for me, it's about creating a perception. And on LinkedIn, it's a really even platform. If you're a company page and you have 1 employee, or you have a company page with 200 employees, it looks exactly the same on LinkedIn. Now, I agree that, you know, LinkedIn pages feel like a bit of a bolt-on right now because they haven't been around for as long as personal profiles. I get dubious when you see that the people that actually profess about the benefits of personal profiles, when they have a vested interest because they come from a HR background and they were on LinkedIn 10 years ago when it was really important to have an online resume, for instance, you know, which is all LinkedIn was. Now it's evolving. Now, one of the things that I've noticed recently is that LinkedIn has started to put some more money into company pages. So you can start to see that there's different tools for invites. They've increased the number that you can invite. They've also increased the filters that, you know, so you can actually have a targeted audience that you choose to invite to your page. They've started a few things like with notifications. So I'm starting to see LinkedIn putting a bit of focus on there. Now, I'm not sure how much more that they can do to personal pages. And there's one thing which I think LinkedIn will focus on more as the platforms changed. I mean, we agree in the last year, usage of content created has gone up 60%. You know, it's crazy the amount of new people that are on LinkedIn. Now, if I'm LinkedIn, I'm sitting here thinking, how can I make more money? And the obvious answer is LinkedIn ads. Now, you can't create a LinkedIn ad without a LinkedIn company page. So I feel that LinkedIn itself is going to heavily promote these types of things so that they can make more money. So, there's no money for LinkedIn to be made, on the other side. I think they'll really push companies.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of work for LinkedIn to do on company pages. The good thing is that you can actually get some really cool results by building your brand awareness on your company page. Again, I'm not saying in place of personal. If you can have both, great. The important thing that I find is if you have a founder or, of a business that's really amazing at what they do, trying to force them and distract them to do something that's just not in them is just going to be a waste of their time and resources. So there's only so many hours in a day. So we want to get them doing the thing that they do best. It's like me when I try and do graphic design, right? It's not my thing. I'm better off outsourcing it and having someone else that's good at it really shoot. And, you need to be involved. I can't say, they can't just wipe their hands and say, I don't want to do it, but it's part of the actual journey. What I find is you can get a really good return on a LinkedIn company page when you start to see a bit of momentum, and it's only about 400 to 500 followers. So you don't need 10,000, you don't need 20,000. We've actually seen with my clients is that with such a small number of followers, they're able to pick up new business opportunities, which is ultimately what you and I both want for our clients. $500,000, for, next to nothing each week, and so that's the kind of thing that I think for small business, there's a real opportunity.
Cool.
And then, hopefully the whole team comes on board, like that's the ultimate aim. Have everyone sharing.
So what would be your advice? Give us your top 3, top 5, whatever you would recommend people to do on their LinkedIn company page. One specific question that I have in this context is, does the content need to be fundamentally different? Would it make sense? Is what I am doing, does this make sense that I simply just cross-post my personal profile content? What should I be doing differently? Give us the top advice on LinkedIn company pages.
Yeah, sure. So from what I found is that 3 posts per week seem to be the magic number. So 1 doesn't seem to be enough to get enough attention and attraction. Again, we want people to know, like, and trust the company. No different to we want, in the personal pages. So my recommendation is 3 posts per week. I find that if we go more than that, it becomes too cumbersome for the business and the wheels fall off, and everyone says it's too hard. But 3 seems to be the sweet spot. So consistency and posting, as with personal profiles, is the number 1 thing that I would recommend. Trying to make it perfect is not something, throw that out the window. It's better to have something than nothing. What I would also say is it's really important to use up the invites each month that LinkedIn gives you. It's the fastest way to grow the page unless you have some big brand behind you. But for a small business, LinkedIn gives you between 100, and they've actually increased some up to 250 invites per month. So once you send out those invites targeted to people that you think would like your page, you actually get a credit back as each person accepts that invite request. So it's important to keep using those, because once you build your community or you build your little tribe of people that are really interested, it keeps momentum up. Number 3, is I would say it's not about you. The number 1 rule, of company pages is it's not about you. It's about what problem does your ideal client have that you solve. How are you going to make their day easier? It's not about you, and I can't say that enough, just because it's really important. And it's the part that most company pages come unstuck on. They just make, oh, look how amazing we are. And then they wonder why no one presses like or comments. Of course no one cares. We don't care, right? No one cares.
It's the number 1 issue that it's the number 1 issue that I see also with personal content, right? That people they start out with always just praising themselves.
Yes. And I would say just keep at it, you can't always, what I find is just because there's a lack of engagement on the page doesn't mean that it doesn't lead to opportunities. So I find that people are watching and observing more on a LinkedIn company page, but it's really surprising what comes through as opportunities just by people keeping an eye on it.
Mm.
Sometimes it can be because they don't want other people to know what they're doing within an industry, if they're all like for like and, competing with each other. So just don't get hung up so much on that. I know they're important to spread the message, but even with low engagement, those opportunities can come. So I'm kind of seeing on the company pages I manage, they kind of sit between 5 and 10% engagement, roughly. And these are only new. They've been going for about 3 or 4 months. So they're quite new in the big scheme of things with, I'm going to say 400 to 1,000 followers. They're generating on average about 10 to 15,000 impressions in an industry that's not, heavily focused on social media, in the one that I work in. So, for a small business, that's a really great return on the investment that these guys can have, and a reach that at LinkedIn, they've got no chance of, doing advertising that would cover to a targeted market, right? So that's the really cool part about LinkedIn. You can absolutely target who you want on your company page. So
Great.
I mean, obviously I get excited over it. The one cool thing, which I will just end on, because I could talk about this all day, so I won't, but I could. The last thing that I'd like to say is there's a cool thing that's popped up. So LinkedIn company pages are, you're only able to create events using LinkedIn company if you've got a LinkedIn company page. Now, LinkedIn events is a bit, the jury's still out for me, but something that I heard today is a unique way that they're being used. I don't know if anyone's crossed over onto Clubhouse at all, but there's a big push, obviously, on the Clubhouse platform. And what we're seeing is people actually directing their followers back to the event because you can use the live chat function on events. And so what we're seeing is one platform driving things back to another platform. And the LinkedIn events chat section, live chat, is what they're using. And you can't do it without a company page. So just like a fairly new kind of thing that people are playing with, but just, another thing that makes a company page a cool thing to have.
Awesome. Can you give us your top 3 LinkedIn company pages just quickly? Which ones should people look at to get a really good example of companies who do company pages well?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple that I would actually say as far as that goes. So the manufacturing millennial is, depending what market you come from, but there's a guy in the US that's called the manufacturing millennial. And that's actually like quite a cool page that you can follow. He does really well with videos, quite new to the platform, but has got some really good impacts. You've got a couple of the big pages like Hewlett Packard, for instance. It depends what you're into, but they have a really good mix of their content. They're another company that I would suggest. There's also like Cheddar Inc. I always find that their stuff really, really interesting.
Cheddar, like the cheese?
Yes.
Okay. Cheddar Inc. Okay.
Lots of engineering discussions. It's just very interesting things that catch your attention, which is interesting. Okay. But, companies like Unilever, Deloitte, Coca-Cola, they've got something like, between 6 million and 13 million followers between them. Sure. And again, heavily focused on behind the scenes. That's the number one thing I would say with company pages. Show people behind the scenes, not just the corporate lookbook. Show what it's like with people in the office, happy birthdays, new staff. That's where the important parts come out.
Any other small companies that are doing a good job?
Yeah, I have quite a few here in Australia. Our industry is actually doing really, really well. So, there's a company called Pharmascope who does a really great work of having competitions, where their audience actually interacts. Aromatic Ingredients is another one who's an ingredient distributor. Just a really good way of bouncing backwards and forwards. So, there's, if they're both in the same space, but they come at it from a really different way, which is cool. So we're finding, again, the more you get involved with the people of the business, the more successful the company page is.
Great. Good. So just as a recap, Manufacturing Millennial, Cheddar Inc., Pharmascope, Aromatic Ingredients. This would be small companies that would be worthwhile for the listeners to check out, just so that they get a good impression. And with this, officially, I withdraw my initial argument that company pages are useless. They definitely have their use for specific use cases. So thank you so much, Michelle, for giving us really good arguments to change my mind about this. I still don't think that it would be, especially if you're a solopreneur, I would definitely not focus my energies on that. But as soon as you have something of a corporate identity that is detached from you immediately personally, definitely have one company page. And as you grow, I really like some of those tips that you gave, like, for example, using up your invites and just over time grow it. You don't have to force it. Don't try to get 1,000 followers in a month, but as you are growing your personal footprint, also grow your company footprint. So I think that's a good middle ground to end on.
Look, I agree. And for solopreneurs, there's always that option that if you promote the company page, you look bigger than just a one-person show. So creating perception. So I think you and I both agree that creating good content that adds value to your audience is most important, no matter it's personal or company. The consistency is really important, and the human side's important. So
awesome.
We agree on all of those things. So thank you for having me as your guest to discuss this.
No problem.
I like that you keep me on my toes, so I have to really think, why am I doing this? So
that's great. Awesome. Cool. Anyone from the participants in the Zoom call, do we have any questions? Either just pop them in the chat, or I can unmute you so you can ask your question. In the meantime, if we don't have questions, I have a couple of just jumping in. No, awesome chat. Great. Thank you, Aaron. So I had a couple of notes that I wanted to make, and anyone, if you just want to jump on, just unmute yourselves. I think you can do that. I don't think I've taken the ability away from you. So just jump on and ask your question. In the meantime, I do have a few things that I wanted to cover. I think especially it would be useful for Haroon, because you mentioned you are looking to start growing on LinkedIn. I think it would be worthwhile if I gave something of a 30,000-foot view on LinkedIn client acquisition for those who are just looking to grow their business just generally. And if I will assume that you know very little about how LinkedIn works. I'm not going to go completely into the basics, but I think it's worthwhile to just, as it befits a first episode of a podcast, to just give a bit of an overview. So a couple of points here. The way you start building your footprint on LinkedIn so that you acquire clients is to overhaul your positioning. Just really make sure that what you are selling is formulated in a way that is shown as value to the client. I think way too many people on LinkedIn present themselves as CEO of Michael Bohannes Inc., right? And that is simply not interesting to your target audience. And that's one of the most basic things you can do, is to phrase your value proposition in your headline as, I help people of type X to solve problem Y through my unique method XYZ. And that is just going to increase your connection rate significantly, because what do people see when you send them a connection request? They see your photo, your name, and your headline. That's all they see. And actually, most people don't really look at the person's profile who they connect with. They kind of make a snap judgment on and I think, Michelle, you would agree with that. They make a snap judgment on what the person represents, right? And the headline really makes a huge difference. So that's the first thing. Now, then once you have created your, you need to have a good picture, background image that conveys your professionalism. Ideally, I think I've seen one, those that work the best are those where you're shown in a position of social proof. So you speaking in front of a crowd, or you leading a workshop, or anything where there's people to be seen that are listening to you. I think that's a very good one, because LinkedIn works on two levels, emotional level and an intellectual level. And if you can tick that emotional box where you kind of create a sense of, yeah, that's a professional, then they're much more likely to connect with you and then respond to your conversation starts. And then the about section, I would argue this is probably the most important for when it comes from a client acquisition standpoint, because your about section is the only place on LinkedIn where you should actively try to sell, where you just simply present your value proposition. You clearly state what you do, who you can help with, what kind of problems you solve, and your testimonials. If you have, I'm always surprised that people don't put testimonials in their about section and instead pack them in the recommendation section, which are way down on the page. Put them up there, just a short quote with a name and a company, so that it looks much more credible than you say, an executive in the healthcare space. Well, yeah, you could have totally made that up, right? So that's why all of this needs to be in the about section, and the about section also needs to contain a call to action that then says, here is how you can contact me and what we can do. What are the next steps? People want to be taken by the hand. And so that is the kind of the starting point. And then your goal with your content is to reach as many people as possible with the highest quality of content as possible. And here is the key thing. Try to have all your content, create your content in a spirit of it being completely free, ungated. Don't try to get people to sign up to your link to your email subscription list. Don't try to don't try to have them opt into a webinar through your content. It's fine on the about page, but not through your content. Your content should be pure generosity, reaching people, as many people as possible, engaging with every single comment that you get. If it's even saying thank you so much, that's good as well. Just be present, be out there, and be extremely generous. And then try to have that. And I would recommend, honestly, I'm posting 3 times a week and 3 times a day. So I'm posting a total of 15 to 18 times a week. I know this sounds like quite a lot, but it's what I do. And this is how I get now about half of my clients come from content from inbound. So it's definitely worth for me to do. And yeah, so that's that's kind of my routine. I would recommend that you post at least once a day. Okay, so that would be my suggested minimum. Of course, if you cannot make it, then don't. But I think you will see an accelerating rate of return. I've tripled since October, November. I've tripled my views of my profile since I started posting 3 times a day. So volume definitely matters. But that's only the content side. And here's the key thing. Most solopreneurs, when they are starting out on LinkedIn, and small B2B companies as well, they purely focus on content. And I also see most LinkedIn coaches do the same, kind of push that same angle. Content. Try to not game the algorithm, but understand the algorithm. And this is what you need to do. Now, it's fine. You should try to understand the algorithm. However, it's not the whole thing. When you have people engaging on your content and you look at their profiles, and you see that they are potentially clients for them, start a one-on-one conversation, one-to-one conversation. That's what I see people not doing way enough. And it's such an easy way to really get talking to people. And as I always say, don't try to sell in your messaging, try to find the truth. And the truth is whether they are someone who you could potentially help with what you do. And that is via the one-to-one conversation, you can find that out. And so do that as part of your daily routine. And I recommend that let's say you have 4 hours a day that you can dedicate to business development. I recommend you split it up, that you do 1 hour, maybe you do content, 1.5 to 2 hours, you do outbound messaging, starting conversations with prospective clients. And this includes adding new people into your network. And then you also dedicate about half an hour a day to engaging in others' content. That is really crucial. And it's also one of the things that really helped me to get much more visibility on LinkedIn. I now regularly allocate time to comment on other people's stuff. And very crucially, comment in a meaningful way. And with that, I mean, support what they're saying, make it very helpful, concrete, but also always add a different angle to it, right? So say, great point. Also, what you might want to consider is blah, blah, blah. Something like this. In that spirit, never tear anybody down, never overtly criticize. And Michelle, I have to compliment you on this. You have gone completely against me. You said I completely disagree, but you've done it in a perfectly respectful way. And I'm a person, I love to be proven wrong through data. And so I think it was a little bit risky in what you've done, not a huge way, but it was a bit risky in that you went straight against the grain of what I say. And that is these days especially, it's a little bit counterintuitive. So I would recommend that unless you really have a very good reason to do so, generally I would recommend against that. But it's a high risk, high reward thing. So allocate time to, I would say, 1 hour to content, 1.5 hours to starting conversations. And in those conversations, move from rapport, exploration, whether they have a problem, to offering them a quick 15-minute exploratory call, and a half an hour a day to comment on other people's content. And if you do that every day and you really have good phone game as well, you're going to get yourself client. Last point on this, the last remark is that, geez, I had a last remark, but now I forgot. That's it. No last remark.
Look, I was going to say, I would say 100% that the generosity is the number one key. So generous with what you share, generous with your comments, generous with your helpful attitude. That's the secret. It's not the content. You know, the content may not be perfect. It may not be the best, you know, grammar. It may not have the highest graphics, but the more helpful you are in nature, the better the results that you'll get. You know, that's what people are drawn to.
Exactly. And one thing that, because I do also see, I don't know about you, Michelle, but I also see people who are putting out very kind of supposedly helpful content, yet they are getting nowhere. I think the reason is that their helpful content is what they think is helpful, and instead of what actually really is. And how can you create content that is helpful? That was, for me, the killer insight is use your actual clients and prospect conversations as the basis for your content. Like today's content, for example, my today's content was inspired by one of my clients telling me, okay, I'm going to sit down and on Sunday, I'm going to churn out 10 videos to distribute over the next few days. And I said, not a good idea. I think it's much better to do one every day. Your cycle of iteration will shorten from 2 weeks down to 1 day, because if you do one thing every day, your improvement is going to be much faster. And so that was because I based it on what I believe is a misconception. This type of content is very likely then to also be useful for people like my client. Because if somebody has a misconception, chances are many others will have a misconception as well. So that would be my 30,000-foot view on LinkedIn client acquisition. Any questions about that, or any other remarks?
I think one thing is, and I've got to actually jump on another call shortly, but I wanted to ask this question. Maybe you can give me a concise answer now. We can talk later. But what's interesting is, even though I didn't quite know what I was doing last year, some of what you're saying is heartening, because when people did view my profile, when I did make the effort to try and engage them one-to-one, those are the ones that have actually turned into either a client or a lead that is now, one of them is actually potentially turning into a talk today after this call to do some work with them.
Amazing.
But I was very direct in a way that probably is inconsistent with what you're saying, because I don't know the softer way to develop the rapport. I was very much like, look, you've looked at my profile, I'm a copywriter, I would love to really help you with what you're doing, which is, that's you saying you like to help, but really, let's be very blunt and real. That's me saying, I'm trying to sell to you, please buy from me. So I'm trying to figure out really how to have a softer conversation, how to build that rapport, because we keep hearing the word help, but I think you were right in the same way that people don't always post helpful content, I still haven't been able to figure out the distinction between brazen selling and helping, because a lot of what people are saying is helping is just basically them trying to sell, but it's just superficially not aggressively asking for the sale in the sort of old school blunt way.
Okay, I definitely have some remarks on this. Michelle, do you have anything to share on this? You were nodding along.
Yeah, look, I think the biggest thing is to focus on what is the one thing that your ideal client is having a problem with. Like really think about, yes, you can write content, but why does that person that you're writing would want you to write for them? So are they time poor? Are they don't have those skills? Think really about what it is and why it is that they'll actually need you. So if you speak to their problems, and actually show how you can help with those problems, they're going to listen. So being helpful for helpful sake is, I think it's more about delivering value. So one of the tricks that I have for all of my clients, is when I come to them and I say to them, okay, we're going to give away everything you pretty much know as your IP away for free. And they're like, no, we're not. But by giving it away and showing what you know and becoming a subject matter expert, they actually want to pay you for those services, and it's really counterintuitive when you first start out, is share a lot of your knowledge. What is it that makes you really good at what you do? Like, what things should I look out for when I've got someone else that's not so good at content writing as you are? So, what makes it different?
Okay.
Right. So just to sort of follow up from that, it feels like what you're saying, it's almost like so I briefly studied a little bit of spin selling, that Neil Rackham book. So what you're basically saying is almost, rather than just going, hey, I want to do something for you, and it's very vague, you try and develop the need by making them aware of the need.
Yeah, like let them know that there's a problem, that they have. And one of the things that I find quite often is, especially when you start out with your new business, is you're really eager to get new clients. And the easiest way I could say it is, the analogy I use is dating. You've got to go first base, second base, third base, don't go straight for home, and so by, reaching out immediately, trying to offer your services, you've skipped all the beginning steps, and that's where people start to know, like, and trust you. And that's what we're trying to really build here.
Definitely. I mean, the dating analogies in business abound. So that's absolutely true. Just one note on what you said, Haroon, is there is a distinction. You need to distinguish between the channels on LinkedIn. When I said be generous, helpful, and all of that, that is about the content that you're putting out and how you display yourself in the comments and the kind of help that you're doing on a public forum. What I don't believe is that you have to be particularly helpful in one-to-one messaging. Of course, you will not, if they ask you one simple question, you can answer. But the other day I had somebody reach out to me and said, hey, could you review my profile? And I was like, sorry, no, that's kind of what I do. And it's kind of, it's a service that I sell. So it's a little bit, no, you're just asking for free advice, and that's not going to happen. But also, one of the reasons why I started this podcast is to create a forum so that people can ask me stuff for free. And if you want me to, on the podcast, to review your profile, I'm happy to do that. But because I use this then for marketing purposes, I'm going to be putting out clips of this and so on. So this is then useful for me as a way to promote my business. And so this is what I'm happy to do that in a generous spirit. That's perfectly fine. And I'm also perfectly happy, and this is really important to get, that whoever I help on this call, on future podcasts, if I review somebody's profile, I never do it with the thought of them ever becoming my client. I really want to emphasize this. And I would recommend that you adopt the same approach. So do serve people in a public forum as well as you can. However, and here's the point, Haroon, once you have somebody on one-to-one, it is your goal to find out as soon as possible whether they are someone who you could help. And if they do, then offer them a call. It doesn't mean that you open the conversation with, hey, I see you have run this business. I want to help you. This is what I can do for you. Do you want to buy now? Of course not. That's not good. And I think it's much better to start out with a bit of rapport building. Hey, I've seen you have a great background image. Where's that from? And so on. You create a bit of rapport. But ultimately, you do have an aim in that conversation. So don't let the conversation die on a vine in rapport la land, but also at the same time, don't pitch slap, which is one of the bad habits of people when they are on LinkedIn. They connect and boom, they send you a pitch.
No, that actually makes a huge amount of sense, because I've got a conversation with someone that's like a potential sort of retainer for doing copy for them per month. And it was off of LinkedIn. But what was interesting was that as I was writing, I was iterating the pitch. So rather than pitch slap him, I just said very bluntly, like, look, I like what you're doing. I think I can contribute. You've asked for the rate. Here's the rate. Rather than like give you a long message here, let's book a call.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk.
Perfect.
Like you said, people are probably getting just barrages of messages in their inboxes. Whereas if you just say, look, a quick 15-minute chat to learn a bit more and see how it could help. That's
exactly. You've done well.
It's not asking for too much.
That's great. I think you've done exactly well. I think people, they have a really hard time finding that sweet spot between the two extremes of the bell curve. Because the one extreme is that you stay in la la land because you do so much rapport building, because you just don't know how to enter into a business conversation. And that usually comes from a fear of rejection, which is something that I face regularly. And I just know it, that it's very likely that once I go from rapport into business, many people will stop responding. That is just the nature of things. You need to get past that. You need to get through that. And the other extreme of the bell curve is the pitch slappers, right? Who just don't really take care. They just treat you as a number, and they just know, if I just send out 100 messages, I'm going to get one client out of that, which is just not a human thing to do. So no, you did exactly right.
I mean, the more you discuss this, the more I feel the parallels with dating, actually. So
You'll remember me for that.
Well, yeah. Definitely.
Just remember, it's a long game that you play on LinkedIn. You're building your reputation, you're building relationships, you're building connections. It's not all going to happen right here and right now. There's not a definite cause and effect. If I post this, I'll get this. It can happen over time. And quite often I find if you reset your expectations of how quick you think those results will come, then that can often take some of that pressure off to try and have conversations in order to get something from someone, and so it's really important. I agree with what you said, Michael, is that it's not trying to get somewhere, but at some point it is about business. You need money to pay bills. That's what you're there for, and it's important to have the conversations and get to that point. And and at least establish if it's something that's an opportunity, or if it's something that's just going to stay. You might genuinely just like that person, and happy to stay in contact, but they're just not someone that you think you'll do business with, and having the distinguished, kind of space there is really important.
Max wrote in chat, what works for me quite well is asking about their goals, chances, and possibilities in their industry, and then going to how are you going to achieve that? That's usually the time when I know if I can help or not. No problem, Haroon. Thank you for coming on. See you in hopefully another call soon. Yeah, Max. So that's a very good point. I really like that. You just look at what their goals are and then how are you going to achieve that? Cool. It's great. Any other questions? Any challenges you have with LinkedIn? Any problems? Anything we can help with? Probably not. Well, you can always dial in. We will now be running those calls at more US friendly times. They will be on, I'll say a quick message to round it off. But yes, we will be running those calls at a more US friendly time at 7 p.m. CET, 6 p.m. UK time. Just go to stateofclientacquisition.com to learn about the timings, to sign up to get alerts and all of that. Links to where you can listen to the podcast version. And Michelle, I really wanted to thank you for jumping on the call, to be willing to be challenged. This is a wonderful thing. I learned so much from you, and it was really great to have you there at an Australia friendly time.
Yes, thank you. And it's, like I said, such a privilege to be on your first podcast. I'm sure it'll be first of many, and I'll be back on the 1,000th one to celebrate.
We discussed
we'll
that.
We'll keep on fighting. It's good to both of us to have the conversation so we both grow and learn.
Absolutely.
And that's the best advantage of LinkedIn, right?
Awesome. Exactly. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. And I'll hear from you next week. You'll hear from me next week. See ya. The State of Client Acquisition is a Content 360 production. Music by Gavin Knox-Grant. To sign up for alerts and to submit written and audio questions, go to stateofclientacquisition.com. Unless I announce it otherwise, the live podcast is recorded on Wednesdays each week at 7 p.m. Central European Time. That's 6 p.m. UK time, 1 p.m. Eastern, and 10 a.m. Pacific. And you can always join by going to www.talktomichael.com. That's Michael without an E. But if you sign up at the podcast page, you'll get the link in an email each week. I'll talk to you in the next episode.
With my eyes closed, we slide.